I had not spoken to my parents for 2 years, after they backed my older sister in every fight, missed the most important day of my life, and called the man I married a step backward. By the time they told relatives I was unstable and controlled by my husband, I had stopped defending myself. Then a certified letter arrived from my father's attorney. He needed my signature on one document. When I read what it said, I laughed so hard the attorney asked whether I needed water. For 2 years, there had been nothing. No calls, messages, holiday cards, or birthday gifts. In that silence, my husband Owen and I built a life that belonged to us. We bought a house outside Raleigh, replaced the kitchen cabinets, and argued over paint while our dog tracked it across the floor. My family was not part of any of it, and I understood that peace did not require their permission. The distance had started long before I blocked their numbers. My sister, Vanessa, was always the person problems solved themselves for. When she dropped out of college halfway through a semester, my parents called it finding her direction. When I changed majors once, my father treated it like proof I could not finish anything. When Vanessa totaled her car after ignoring a warning light, another one appeared in the driveway before the insurance paperwork was complete. When my transmission failed while I was working 2 jobs, my mother sent me a budgeting article. Vanessa could miss Thanksgiving because a friend invited her skiing, and by breakfast everyone had forgotten. If I arrived 20 minutes late because my shift ran over, my mother mentioned it for months. "Your sister always makes time for family," she would say while folding laundry or pouring coffee, as if she were making an innocent observation instead of sharpening a blade. For years, I told myself every family had a favorite. I told myself it did not mean they loved me less, only that Vanessa needed more help. I repeated that explanation until my university graduation, when it became impossible to believe. I had worked mornings at a bakery and evenings in the campus library while carrying a full course load. I graduated with honors and had a position waiting at an architecture firm in Charlotte. My parents had 2 reserved seats near the front. I checked twice because some part of me expected them to disappear. An hour before the ceremony, my mother called. I was standing beneath the basketball banners in the arena hallway, wearing my cap and gown, when her name lit up my screen. "Claire, sweetheart, we're not going to make it," she said, using the same tone she used when canceling lunch. I thought there had been an accident. Instead, Vanessa had forgotten to renew her passport before a last-minute trip to Mexico. My parents were driving her 3 hours to an emergency appointment because, according to my mother, she's already paid for the resort and someone has to help her. That was the entire explanation. I waited for her to say she was joking. "Mom, my graduation starts in an hour." "I know, honey, but the passport office closes at 4. We can't be in 2 places at once." She did not apologize or ask whether someone else could drive Vanessa. She simply told me they had chosen, then ended the call. I walked into the arena with my phone still in my hand. My roommate's parents were seated near the aisle, waving when they saw me. Her mother had brought an extra bouquet and pressed it into my arms afterward. "We're proud of you," she said. I nearly cried because she sounded as though she meant it. My parents sent one text that evening. "Hope it went well." Vanessa found her passport appointment. A year later, I met Owen at a tire shop after a nail ruined one of my tires on the way to work. He was not polished in the way my father valued. He was practical and kind without making a performance of it. He stayed after closing to check my spare, then refused to charge for the extra work. When we started dating, he was saving to open a repair garage. He read business manuals at breakfast and kept a notebook of equipment prices and floor plans. I loved the quiet certainty of him. Nothing about Owen needed an audience. I believed introducing him to my parents might change something. Maybe if they saw how steady he was, they would understand I had built a good life. Maybe they would finally look at me without comparing me to Vanessa. I chose a steakhouse in Durham that my father liked and made the reservation under his name because small acts of deference usually softened him. Before dinner, I warned Owen about politics, money, and my sister. "I'm not trying to win them over," he said. "I just want to meet the people who raised you." The evening lasted 23 minutes before my father turned it into an inspection. He asked where Owen had gone to college. Owen said he had completed a technical program and worked as a mechanic while planning his own shop. My father set down his fork. "And what exactly is the long-term plan?" he asked. Owen explained the lease he was considering, his savings, and the certifications he was completing. Then he looked at me and said, "You used to have more ambition. This feels like a downgrade." My mother stared at her wine. Vanessa laughed once, then covered it with a cough. Owen did not defend himself. He looked at me instead, and that made the humiliation worse because there was no anger in his face, only concern. I stood and reached for my coat. "We're leaving." My father leaned back. "Claire, don't be dramatic." For once, I did not explain myself. I took Owen's hand and walked out without touching my dinner. We drove home in silence. The moment we entered our apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and blocked my parents, my sister, and every relative who had carried messages for them. Owen never asked me to do it. He sat beside me and said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." So I chose silence. The first few weeks were quieter than I expected. I had imagined angry voicemails, surprise visits, or a demand that I explain myself. Instead, the pressure came through people I barely knew. An aunt I had not spoken to since high school messaged to ask whether I was safe. A cousin called and said my mother was worried Owen had isolated me. That was when I learned the story my parents were telling.
According to my mother, I had suffered a breakdown after dinner. Owen had convinced me to cut off everyone who loved me, and I was too fragile to understand what he was doing. My father told relatives they were giving me space until I became reasonable again. At first, I wanted to correct everyone. I drafted messages explaining the graduation, the years of comparisons, and the way my father had spoken to my husband. Then I deleted them. Defending myself would have opened the door again, and closing it had been the first honest thing I had done for myself in years. Going no contact was not revenge. It was a boundary I needed because every conversation with them ended with me questioning my memory. You do not make that decision once. You make it every holiday, every birthday, and every time a photograph appears where you were not expecting it. 8 months later, on Christmas morning, Owen found me sitting on our closet floor with a photo album across my knees. I had been searching for wrapping paper when it fell from the top shelf. One picture showed me at 6 years old on my father's shoulders at a summer fair near Wilmington. We were laughing at something outside the frame. In another, my mother knelt beside me on my first day of school, fixing the collar of my dress. I stared at those photographs and tried to understand how the people in them had become the people I had blocked. Owen did not tell me I was right or remind me of the restaurant. He sat beside me until I closed the album. Then he asked, "Tea or coffee?" It was such an ordinary question that I started crying. "Tea," I said. He made it with too much honey, and we spent the morning on the couch with the album closed on the table. Months passed. Owen leased a brick garage outside Raleigh and opened his repair shop with 2 lifts and 1 employee. The first months were difficult. Some weeks he barely covered payroll. Then customers began returning and sending their friends. We adopted a shelter dog named Mabel, a brown mutt with one ear that refused to stand up. We took a weekend trip to the Outer Banks, ate too much seafood, and burned our shoulders in the sun. Life became ordinary in the best way. About a year and a half into the silence, I received a text from Tessa, the assistant manager at Vanessa's salon. I had met her twice. "I hope you're doing okay," it said. "Things have been difficult here lately. I probably shouldn't contact you, but I wanted to."
I almost replied, but I did not know what answer would be safe. If Tessa was contacting me for Vanessa, responding would reopen a door I had fought hard to close. If she was warning me about something serious, I had no idea what it was. I deleted the message 3 days later. Looking back, that was the first crack in a wall I did not yet realize was breaking. 6 months passed. Owen's shop became profitable enough for him to hire a second mechanic. We found a small house in Cary with a crooked fence and a kitchen untouched since the 90s. We spent a Saturday painting the cabinets. By evening, we were sitting on the floor arguing about whether the grout looked gray or beige, both laughing too hard to stay angry. None of it involved my parents. I had grown up believing family approval was what made a life legitimate. Without it, I expected every success to feel incomplete. Instead, the house felt more real because it was ours alone. We even began talking about having children one day. Not soon, but eventually. For the first time, that conversation belonged only to us. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March, a certified letter arrived at my office. I assumed it was something tedious connected to the mortgage. The return address belonged to a law firm in downtown Raleigh that I had never heard of. The letter stated that the firm represented my father, Richard Bennett, in a matter requiring immediate resolution. A document required my signature, and I was asked to appear before the end of the week to review and sign it. It did not explain what the document was. For the rest of the day, I could not focus. 2 years of silence, and suddenly my father had sent an attorney to my workplace. That frightened me more than the legal language. Someone had searched for my employer instead of calling. Either they no longer had my number, or they knew I would not answer. That evening, Owen and I imagined every possibility. None were good. Maybe my father was challenging an old family account. Maybe he wanted to make the story that I was unstable official. I even imagined guardianship paperwork, though I knew it was unlikely. Fear does not care whether a scenario is logical. It only asks whether it is possible. I barely slept. On Thursday, I drove downtown alone. The law office occupied the top floors of a glass building, exactly the kind of place my father loved. Everything inside was polished wood, great carpet, and expensive silence. A receptionist led me into an office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The attorney introduced himself as Daniel Mercer. He did not shake my hand or ask how I had been. He pointed to the chair across from his desk and pushed a thick folder toward me. "Your father was clear that this needs to be signed today," he said. I opened it expecting the worst. What I found looked almost ordinary. It was a release form connected to a trust account my grandfather had created in my name when I was 19.
The account had been created by my grandfather shortly before he died. I remembered signing papers at 19 without understanding much beyond the fact that he wanted both granddaughters to have something protected from the rest of the family. I had not thought about it in years. According to the documents, Vanessa had used that account as collateral for a loan connected to the expansion of her salon. The bank had reviewed the arrangement, discovered that my name was still attached to the trust, and frozen everything until I approved the release. Without my signature, the loan could not close. I read the page twice. For 2 years, my mother had described me as unstable, selfish, and manipulated by my husband. Now the same family needed the unstable daughter to unlock money for the child they had always trusted. The irony hit me so suddenly that I laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It echoed across the office and made Daniel Mercer lean back in his chair. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm better than all right." He watched me carefully. "My mother has spent 2 years telling everyone I cannot make rational decisions," I said. "Now your firm wants my rational decision on a document that saves Vanessa's expansion." Daniel glanced at the folder. "I'm only here to explain the legal purpose. No, you're here because my father believed sending an attorney would make this feel unavoidable." He folded his hands. "Your father has emphasized that timing is important." "I'm sure he has." I slid the unsigned form back across the desk. "My answer is no." Daniel did not touch the folder. "You may want to consider the consequences before deciding." "I have. If the release is not signed, the financing could collapse." That sounds like Vanessa's problem. The words felt colder than I intended, but I did not take them back. My sister had laughed when my father insulted Owen. She had watched my parents miss my graduation for her mistake and never once apologized. Daniel picked up his pen. "Would you like me to tell your father anything specific?" "Yes. Tell him I hope the salon was worth missing my graduation." For the first time, his expression changed. It was small, almost invisible, but he looked uncomfortable. I stood, buttoned my coat, and left before he could begin another sentence. The satisfaction followed me all the way home. My mother called 4 times that evening from an unfamiliar number. I let every call go to voicemail and deleted the messages without listening. Over dinner, Owen and I laughed about the meeting. It felt like a perfect ending. After 2 years of silence, they had finally reached out because they needed something, and I had finally been able to refuse. For several days, I slept better than I had in months. Then the feeling faded. One detail from the paperwork would not leave me alone. The amount listed beside the trust account had been far too large for a salon renovation. Not remotely close.
I brought it up to Owen 2 nights later while we cleaned the kitchen. "The number on that release was almost $900,000, I said. "Vanessa Salon has 6 chairs. What kind of expansion costs that much?" Owen stopped wiping the counter. "Did the document say exactly what the money was for?" "It said equipment, renovations, and working capital. That wording can hide almost anything." He opened his laptop at the table. Owen had spent years comparing leases, equipment loans, and business filings while building his shop. He knew where public records lived and how to read details most people skipped. Within an hour, the salon stopped being the main question. Vanessa's business was real. She had filed permits for a second location in Chapel Hill and signed a lease 6 months earlier. But the projected cost was less than a third of the amount attached to my trust. The rest appeared connected to Bennett Industrial Supply, my father's company. Owen found filings showing the company had taken out larger credit lines over the previous 18 months. One vendor had sued for unpaid invoices. Another claim had been settled quietly. A longtime board member had resigned without explanation. The company still looked successful outside. My father appeared in business magazines, sponsored charity dinners, and posted photographs from conferences. Underneath that polished image, the numbers looked strained. "You think the salon is being used as a cover?" I asked. "I think the paperwork may describe one transaction while financing another." That possibility should have made me angry. Instead, it frightened me. My father had always cared about appearances, but hiding a failing company behind Vanessa's business and my trust was different from lying to relatives. It was deliberate, documented, and dangerous. Owen zoomed in on one filing. "Look here, Vanessa's salon assets were pledged against an earlier loan last year. If her business is already collateral, why would the bank suddenly need your trust for the same expansion?" I stared at the screen. They wouldn't. The next morning, I called Daniel Mercer's office. The receptionist transferred me at once, which told me they had been waiting. Daniel's voice was warmer than it had been in person. "Claire, I'm glad you called. Has your position changed?" "No, I have a question." "Of course. The amount on the release is too high for a salon expansion." There was a pause. "I'm not able to discuss the underlying business details. I did some research. Vanessa's permits and lease do not come close to that number, but my father's company has been taking out increasingly aggressive loans." Another pause, longer this time. "I would prefer to discuss this in person," he said. "Why?" "The situation is more complicated than the document suggests." That sentence confirmed more than any direct answer could have. I agreed to return tomorrow, but this time, I would not go alone. Owen came with me the next afternoon. He carried a folder of permits, loan records, and public filings. I carried the release form, still unsigned. Daniel Mercer looked uneasy when he saw us. Before he could speak, I placed the folder on his desk. "I know the money is not really for Vanessa's salon," I said, "so don't pretend it is." Daniel exhaled and removed his glasses. "You are correct." The words hit harder than expected. "What is it for?" He glanced toward Owen, then back at me. "The financing is tied to a working capital facility for Bennett Industrial Supply." "My father's company?" "Yes. And the salon language?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "Your sister's business was used to structure an earlier loan. Her assets are already pledged. The bank required more collateral with no previous connection to your father's company." Owen leaned forward. "So they chose Claire's trust because it was clean?" Daniel paused. "That is one way to describe it." I looked at the release form. What had appeared to be a request to help Vanessa was an attempt to attach my name to my father's failing company. If I sign, what happens?
The trust becomes available as collateral. And if the company defaults, the bank could liquidate the asset. Could it affect my credit? Potentially. My ability to borrow later? Daniel hesitated. Yes. I laughed once, without humor. So my father wants me to risk my savings, credit, and future so he can keep pretending his company is healthy? The release does not make you personally responsible for the debt, Daniel said. Owen opened one filing. But if the collateral is seized under her name, she carries the financial damage. Daniel's silence answered him. Cold replaced anger. For 2 years, my parents had told everyone I was incapable of responsible decisions. Now they wanted to use the cleanest thing attached to my name to rescue a business they had nearly destroyed. What happened to the company? I asked. I cannot discuss confidential details. You contacted me, sent documents to my workplace, and asked me to put my property behind a loan. You do not get to hide behind confidentiality. Daniel looked exhausted. The company has been under pressure. Discrepancies were discovered during an internal review. What kind? He glanced at the door. Inventory valuations. Owen and I exchanged a look. Inflated inventory? Owen asked. Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. Certain assets were reported at values the bank later questioned. Those figures supported earlier credit lines. I understood. My father overstated what the company owned to borrow more money. I did not say that. You didn't have to. The room went silent. And Vanessa Salon was pledged to cover the first gap? I said. Now that her business is fully leveraged, he wants my trust to cover the next one. Daniel looked at me directly. Yes. That single word changed everything again.
I could only hear the air vent. All my life, I believed Vanessa was protected because she was loved more. The new cars, excuses, missed graduation, and the way my parents rearranged every room around her needs proved she was untouchable. But she was not untouchable. She had simply been useful first. My father pledged her salon to cover the damage from his inflated records. Now that her business could not absorb another loan, he reached for me. Does Vanessa know what her assets are securing? I asked. He looked away. I cannot speak to what she understood when she signed. That means no. The documents were presented through separate counsel. Counsel hired by my father? He did not answer. Owen's hand closed around mine beneath the desk. What happens if Claire refuses? The bank has reopened its review. Without clean collateral, it may escalate to compliance. And then, there could be a formal fraud referral. My signature was not needed to save Vanessa's salon. It was needed to delay an investigation into my father. If I sign, does her salon survive? Daniel hesitated. Her assets are tied to the earlier facility. Even with your trust, there is no guarantee the salon would be protected. So this does nothing for her. It may give the company more time. My father more time, I corrected. Daniel said nothing. My anger shifted. I had spent years resenting Vanessa for being chosen. I believed every gift proved she had won something I lost. Now I understood my parents had not built a throne for her. They built a platform they could stand on. When it cracked, they were willing to let her fall. I thought of Tessa's message. Things have been difficult here lately. Maybe payroll was late. Maybe suppliers were unpaid while Vanessa told everyone the second location was going perfectly. Did my mother know? Daniel's expression tightened. I communicated primarily with your father. That was not my question. She attended several meetings. Of course she had. The woman who called me unstable had helped turn both daughters into collateral. I pushed the release across the desk. I am not signing. Refusing may have serious consequences for your family. No, my father's decisions may have consequences. Do not place them on me. His eyes dropped. I will not risk my trust, credit, or future to conceal records I had nothing to do with, and I will not help him use Vanessa's business as a shield. I have not characterized it that way. You said inventory values were inflated to support loans. Another asset covered the gap, and now mine is needed to prevent a compliance referral. What word would you prefer? He had none. I stood. Tell my father exactly what I said. Daniel nodded. At the door, I stopped. Send me every document that mentions my trust, name, or signature. For what purpose? So my attorney can review how close my family came to using me without my consent. He looked afraid.
The documents arrived next morning by secure link. 87 pages. Owen printed everything at the shop while I called an attorney of my own, Maya Patel, a trust and commercial dispute specialist. She met us that afternoon. Maya read for nearly 40 minutes, marking pages. When she finally looked up, she looked controlled, but angry. They did not forge your signature, she said, but they came dangerously close to creating an arrangement that depended on you signing without understanding what you were approving. She pointed near the end. This language would allow the lender to seize the entire trust if Bennett Industrial defaults. It also gives the bank broad authority to report the loss under your name. So Daniel minimized it. He described the legal distinction, not the practical risk. Maya turned another page. There is something else. Your father signed a statement saying he had authority to negotiate on behalf of all family beneficiaries. He doesn't. I know. The trust names you as the sole beneficiary. He has no authority over it. My stomach tightened. Is that illegal? Potentially fraudulent, depending on what he told the bank and when. Owen leaned back slowly. So the bank thinks Richard controls an asset he does not control. Exactly. Your refusal did more than stop the loan. It exposed a representation that may already be part of their compliance review. Then I understood Daniel's fear. My father had not merely asked for help. He had told people it was his to give. Maya told me not to contact my family until she notified the bank that I had never authorized my father to act for me. She sent the letter that evening. My mother called 12 times the next day. My father called twice. Vanessa did not call at all. Then an email arrived from my father with the subject line, "Family Emergency." "Claire, you are allowing personal resentment to destroy livelihoods. Hundreds of employees and their families depend on this company. Whatever happened between us does not justify what you are doing. Sign the release. We can discuss everything else afterward." There was no apology, no mention of my graduation, Owen, the lies, or the 2 years of silence. Only an order dressed as responsibility. I forwarded it to Maya without replying. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. This time, it came from Vanessa. "What did you do?" I stared at those 4 words. Not, "What is happening?" Not, "Are you okay?" What did you do? The accusation was so familiar that I felt 16 again, standing in the kitchen while my parents explained that Vanessa's mistake had somehow become my attitude problem. I almost deleted it. Instead, I typed one sentence. "Ask Dad what he used your salon to secure." The typing bubble appeared, vanished, then returned. "What are you talking about?" For the first time in 2 years, I answered my sister honestly. "I'm talking about the reason your business may already belong to the bank."
Vanessa called under a minute later. "What do you mean the bank owns my salon?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp, but underneath it, I heard panic. "Dad pledged your business against a loan for Bennett Industrial. The documents say your assets secured an earlier credit facility. That is not possible. The loan was for my second location. That is what he told me about my trust, too." She went silent. I explained the release, the inflated inventory values, and the bank's reopened compliance review. Vanessa interrupted 3 times to say I had misunderstood. Then I sent her the pages Maya had marked. "I signed papers last year," she finally said. "Dad said putting the salon under the family company would improve my rate. Did you have your own attorney?" "His attorney reviewed everything." "That is not the same thing. I know that now." Vanessa told me suppliers had started demanding payment upfront. Payroll had been late twice, and the landlord for the second location had threatened to cancel the lease. My father blamed delays at the bank and promised everything would clear once I signed. "He said you were refusing because you hate me," she whispered. "I refused because the document put my trust behind his company." "Did you know Mom and Dad missed my graduation because of your passport appointment?" I asked. "Yes. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I thought they would still make it. Then Mom said you were overreacting, and I believed her. You laughed when Dad insulted Owen." "I know. I am sorry," she said. It was the first apology I had heard from her that did not contain the word "but." I did not forgive her or say everything was fine. You need your own lawyer before Dad convinces you to sign anything else. Maya referred her to someone independent. By evening, Vanessa had sent copies of every document related to the salon. My father had routed company debt through her business for more than a year. Some agreements listed renovations that never happened. Others valued equipment at nearly double its purchase price. Vanessa had signed because she trusted him and because every document had been presented as help. The golden child had not been protected. She had been trained not to question the person spending her future. 2 days later, the bank froze all new lending connected to my father's company and suspended the salon's accounts pending review. My father left a voicemail for Owen. "You have no idea what you have involved my daughters in," he said. "Fix this before people lose everything." Owen saved the recording and forwarded it to Maya. My mother sent a message accusing me of jealousy, cruelty, and revenge. In the final line, she wrote that Vanessa had always been loyal to the family, unlike me. Vanessa forwarded me the same message with one sentence beneath it. She sent this while sitting across from me. For the first time, my sister saw the performance from the audience instead of the stage.
The bank's review moved faster than expected. Within a week, Bennett Industrial's lender suspended its credit lines. Vendors stopped extending terms. The second salon location closed before opening. Vanessa's original salon operated under restrictions while her attorney separated its income from my father's debt. My father blamed me. He told employees that a disgruntled family member had interfered with financing. He told relatives I sabotaged the company because I could not tolerate Vanessa's success. My mother repeated it until people who had ignored me for 2 years began sending messages. This time, I did not stay silent. Maya said I could correct lies about my actions without discussing the investigation. I sent one reply to relatives who contacted me. I did not freeze the company's accounts. I refused to pledge a trust belonging solely to me after discovering its purpose had been misrepresented. The lender made its own decision based on documents provided by my father. Most people never replied. A few apologized. One uncle said he had invested because my father promised the company was expanding. Maya connected him with the bank's investigators. After that, the story stopped being family gossip. It became evidence. Vanessa moved into our guest room for 3 weeks after the bank restricted her accounts. The arrangement was awkward. We had not shared a home since we were teenagers, when every room felt like a competition arranged by our parents. Now she slept beneath boxes we had not unpacked and spent mornings at our kitchen table with legal papers around her coffee.
She apologized in pieces. For the graduation, for the restaurant, for accepting every excuse our parents gave her because questioning them might have meant losing the benefits. I knew things were unfair, she admitted one night. I convinced myself you were stronger, so it hurt you less. That is what people say when they want permission to keep hurting the person who complains least. She nodded. I know. I still did not trust her completely. Trust is not restored by one apology after decades of damage. But I started believing she was finally seeing the family I had seen all along. Federal investigators arrived 2 weeks later. Maya warned us that the bank's fraud referral had expanded beyond inflated inventory values. Payments had been moved between Bennett Industrial, the salon, and 2 shell companies controlled by my father's financial officer. My mother's name appeared on one. When Vanessa heard that, she went pale. She told me she never understood the business side. She understood enough to sign. The investigators asked for my certified letter, the release form, my father's emails, and Owen's voicemail. I gave them everything. Then they asked whether anyone pressured me to sign after I learned the truth. I handed over my mother's messages. For 2 years, she had called me unstable. Now her own words were becoming evidence of coercion.
The investigation lasted months. Bennett Industrial did not collapse in one dramatic moment. It came apart in layers. The bank called its loans. Suppliers filed claims. Employees learned retirement payments had been delayed, and vehicles were leased through unexplained accounts. My father called it temporary until investigators searched the office. That was the day news used the word fraud. Reporters filmed employees carrying boxes and showed my father's photograph beside headlines about inflated assets and hidden debt. My mother called that evening. I answered for the first time in 2 years. Claire, she said, crying, you have to tell them this was a misunderstanding. I looked across the kitchen at Owen. Vanessa sat beside him. What should I tell them? That your father was protecting the company. He made difficult choices because people depended on him. He used Vanessa's salon, lied about my trust, and tried to make me secure a loan without telling me what it was. He was going to explain once the financing was approved. That is waiting until we could no longer say no. Her crying stopped. You have always wanted to see the worst in this family. No, I spent most of my life inventing better explanations for you. She said my father could go to prison, the house might be seized, and their friends had stopped answering. Every sentence described what they might lose. She never asked about Vanessa or whether the letter had frightened me. Then she said what made everything clear. If you had just signed, none of this would be happening. Vanessa closed her eyes. It was already happening, I said. My signature would only have hidden it longer. I ended the call. My father was indicted in September for bank fraud, false statements, and conspiracy. His financial officer was charged. My mother was not arrested, but investigators identified her shell company as a place money had been moved. She accepted an agreement requiring cooperation and repayment. Vanessa lost the second location and nearly lost the original salon. Her attorney negotiated a settlement that let her keep operating after surrendering equipment and repaying funds tied to my father's company. She started over with 4 chairs instead of 6. Tessa stayed. Vanessa invited Owen and me to the reopened salon. The walls were repainted, the expensive furniture was gone, and a sign thanked customers for their patience. It's smaller, she said. It's yours, I replied. I don't know how to fix what I did to you. You don't fix 20 years in one conversation. I know it. But you can stop repeating it. She nodded. That became the beginning of our relationship now. Not the sisterhood we should have had, and not forgiveness without conditions. Something slower, built from truth instead of competition. My parents asked through their attorneys whether I would support leniency. I declined. For once, silence was not avoidance. It was my answer.
A year after the indictment, my father accepted a plea agreement. He stood in court and admitted that he had inflated inventory values, hidden losses, and used family assets to keep Bennett Industrial borrowing after it should have stopped. He never looked at me. My mother sat behind him with both hands around her purse. Vanessa sat beside me. Owen was on my other side. When the judge asked whether anyone wished to speak, my father's attorney glanced toward us. I had prepared a statement. It contained every moment I once needed him to understand. The empty graduation seats, the restaurant, the lies about my marriage, and the certified letter sent only because my name still had value. I left it folded in my bag. Nothing I said would turn him into the father I had spent years waiting for. Explaining the damage would only give him one last chance to decide which parts mattered. So I said nothing. My father received a prison sentence and was ordered to pay restitution. The company was sold in pieces. Innocent people lost stability because he protected an image long after the business underneath it was gone. But those consequences were his responsibility, not mine. My mother moved into a smaller house and told relatives I had abandoned her. Fewer people believed her now. I kept no contact with both of them. Vanessa and I rebuilt slowly. We met for coffee. Sometimes we discussed her salon, Owen's shop, or whether Mabel had learned not to steal socks. Ordinary conversation became more valuable than dramatic reconciliation. One afternoon, Vanessa handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph from my graduation. I stood between my roommate and her parents, holding the bouquet her mother had brought. I found it in Mom's desk, Vanessa said. She kept it. I studied my younger face. I looked exhausted, proud, and sad. For years, I thought that photograph proved who had failed to show up.
Now I noticed the people who had. I framed it and placed it in our hallway. Owen and I later had a daughter. We named her June after his grandmother. When she was born, Vanessa waited until I invited her. She held June carefully and cried without asking me to comfort her. My parents learned about the baby from someone else. They sent a card through their attorney. I returned it unopened. Some people called that cruel. Maybe they imagined becoming a parent would make me understand mine. It did. It taught me that love is not proven by claiming someone. It is proven by protecting them when doing so costs you something. My parents had protected themselves every time. I finally protected my own family instead. The letter from my father's attorney once seemed like an interruption from a life I had escaped. In the end, it proved that leaving had not made me unstable, selfish, or weak. It had kept my name clean when everyone else was willing to spend it. And when they came back for that name, I knew exactly what it was worth. It was worth keeping.